Hello, loves. How are you? In this deep dive, you are going to learn why you have cancer symptoms, chronic pain, chronic insomnia, chronic digestive issues, chronic insomnia, and so much more, and how everything is connected. When I was in crisis in the fall of 2024 with a life-threatening leaky body presenting early MS symptoms, and since 2013 I was bleeding internally with colon cancer type symptoms, I say everything is a response to our toxic body or bucket or womb that is overflowing with toxins because our body barriers are being broken and they're flooding, so everything is overflowing. And by midlife, we are in crisis in a cytokine storm. And my crisis, I was running. I'm a personal trainer, a primal one, a root cause Buddhist biohacker. Hello to my new Spotify listeners. This is my first Spotify episode. And my son had to lift me up off the street, off the cross of the sidewalk. I couldn't lift myself up. I couldn't get myself out of a tub. I was choking in my sleep. I knew tapping. If you're choking or if you have any pain, just tap or pinch it away. I don't use man-made synthetic meds. They're toxic for our bucket. And when I came home in September, or when I was home in the fall of 2024, my body felt very acidic. And I had gone to the hospital 1 week prior and I visited my doctor, and all they kept saying, it's mental, it's mental, it's mental. And I'm like, it's not. This is because our labs are clean for the type A athletes, personal trainers who are proactive, perfectionist problem solvers. We're petrified and parentified, people pleasers. And I just wanted the root cause of my lifelong issues. I never went to a doctor. My mom did. And I kept all her notes. She's no longer with us because she passed using MAID. My whole mission for this shy little Buddhist who does not like to be seen. I was anorexic for decades because I wanted to stay small. But that only caused me more problems because our society loves people who are really, really tiny, and they always want to know why. We need fat on our body. It's part of what we need to survive. We can't be sticks and bones. And even when I still had a bloated Buddha belly. So this is what I help you heal with the 40-day Wounds and Walls Trauma and Toxin Detox over at Dharma. And when I was home and crashing, I said, my body feels really acidic. I also had a really white-coated tongue. And so I just Googled, for some reason, baking soda and acidity in the body. And I just found that was one of the early MS symptoms too, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda in the morning on an empty stomach because I did a 3-week fast. I did have a couple of almonds once in a while if I just couldn't handle it because I was walking. But the protocol calls for major tears. Now my tears flow. I kept a stiff upper lip all my life. I'm a military firstborn baby burden born soul and told to keep quiet and all of that fun stuff. When you know, you know. And I'm a stress cleaner. So whenever I was suffering, I would clean. Or I suffered from many addictions. You pick it, I probably did it. I don't have any shame anymore. I've released it all. In this episode, I hope you will uncover the root cause of your lifelong issues. I'm here to help you get well frugally, as I'm living on $100 a month for food, as I am invisible like so many other here in Canada, because our OHIP system in Ontario does not have doctors on the regular who will identify mold illness and sick building syndrome and leaky body syndrome. Thanks to the latest microbiome research in the last 6 years, this is why things are coming together. A quick tip, I mentioned it in this video and podcast, that you should check out the plastic detox on Netflix. And I'm on LinkedIn at De-Stress with DSOS, and my latest post over there, I am connected with the brilliant scientists who are in there. So if you're dealing with fertility issues, I had 9 miscarriages. This is why. It's what we're putting into our body, who we are loving, because it puts us in a constant state of stress. Your parasympathetic mode nerve has been going since the beginning of time, from us firstborn, parentified, petrified souls who were not rooted in love. I didn't get hugged. Me and my boy hug all the time. And my brother is the best dad on the planet. So I don't understand why some people say, you know, you can't be a good soul. You can be a good soul even in a toxic environment. It's what you choose to do every single day. When I tell people how to heal, they say it's a lot. And I guess it is, but this is how I've lived my whole life. Now, especially since 2017, when I dropped the booze, I was trying to love my liver back to health, which is one of my messages. love your liver and leave the liquor, and love your liver and leave the sugar. Because I want you well. And when we're putting toxins into our bodies, start this if you're not sure if you have mold illness or sick building syndrome. Remove the booze. It's poisonous, and it builds up over time. You need to remove the processed sugar and the processed foods. Shop on the outer line of the grocery store. That's where your foods are. That's all you should be putting into your body, and no man-made synthetic meds long term. I understand if you need them for emergencies, but I don't even take antibiotics. I didn't take one as an adult until I was in crisis, and that put me in more of a crisis because it was another toxin for my body. And then I had pneumonia at the same time. All of this, I do not use any man-made meds. I created a jungle juice and a ginger-garlic-turmeric blend that's separate from the jungle juice, but I put this combination of the ginger and the turmeric and the garlic. I put it in a blender with some clean water, and then I put it in a mason jar, and then I take out a tablespoon and I put it in my tea once a day or twice a day, depending on how I'm feeling. I hope this video will be helpful for you, and if you have any questions or ideas for a future video that you need help with, just let me know at dstarma or in the comments. Sending loving kindness from Canada's capital. You are love, and you are peace, and you are the medicine, because you are nature, and nature can heal in any environment, but it can't heal in the same environment that is making you sick. Ciao for now.
All right, today we're going to dive into something called the Bodie Berry Manifesto. Now, this is a framework that puts forward a really unconventional idea about why so many of us are struggling with these chronic, mysterious illnesses, the kind that are just so hard to pin down. So let's unpack it. So this really gets to the heart of what the manifesto is trying to tackle. I mean, have you ever had that feeling you feel chronically unwell, just exhausted or anxious, but you go to the doctor, you run all the tests, and they come back saying everything's normal? It's incredibly frustrating, right? Well, the manifesto basically says, hey, the problem isn't in your head, it's in the world around you.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the mystery illness itself. Then we'll dig into what the manifesto claims is the root cause. From there, we'll look at a forgotten piece of science it brings back, dive into the 40-day healing protocol it proposes, and wrap up with its ultimate goal, healing to actually change the law.
All right, section 1. So first things first, the manifesto gives this whole constellation of symptoms a name. It calls it environmental injury. And just that name alone is a huge statement, isn't it? It immediately shifts the focus away from what's wrong with me to what's wrong with my environment.
And it gets even more specific. The manifesto talks about a type of person it calls a high-sensing soul. And for these individuals, it argues that things like acute anxiety and depression, well, they aren't just mental health issues. They're actually the body's biological cry for help. It's like the body is literally overwhelmed, kind of drowning in an environment it just can't handle anymore.
Okay, so if the environment is the problem, what exactly in the environment is causing all this? The manifesto lays out this two-pronged explanation for where this environmental injury is coming from.
So this first part is a pretty big claim. The manifesto draws a line straight back to the 1980s. It alleges that's when big tobacco companies bought up major sugar companies. And get this, they supposedly applied what they knew about engineering addictive nicotine to the food supply. The argument is that this created a whole generation raised on foods designed to be irresistible, which just overloaded our natural detox systems. The manifesto calls these our toxic buckets. It also claims this damaged our internal body barriers, the protective linings inside us.
And then there's the second part of the cause, the poisonous planet we live on right now. We're talking about things like sick buildings with hidden mold, the microplastics that are literally everywhere, and all these fat-soluble toxins. The manifesto claims these toxins don't just pass through us, they get lodged in our tissues, specifically our fascia, and they coexist right there with stored traumas. So that's the problem. It sounds pretty daunting, right? So what's the solution? Well, this is where the manifesto pivots. And interestingly, it bases its entire protocol on a piece of scientific research from all the way back in the 1930s.
And here it is. The scientific key, according to the manifesto, is something called the Warburg Effect. Now, this isn't some fringe idea. It's a Nobel Prize-winning discovery from 1931. And what it basically says is that disease loves an environment that's acidic, low on oxygen, and full of sugar. The manifesto presents this as a kind of forgotten key to health. In an era where we're so focused on genes and pills, it's a totally different approach. And this one idea, it's the foundation for everything that comes next.
Which brings us to the time frame of the protocol itself, 40 days. So why 40? Is it just a random number? According to the Manifesto, no, not at all. It's supposed to be the biological sweet spot, the amount of time your body needs for real cellular turnover to happen. Think of it like giving your metabolism a complete factory reset.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. The 40-day healing protocol. This is the Manifesto's proposed path to actually recover from that environmental injury.
Now, this is absolutely crucial to understanding the Manifesto's whole worldview. It draws a really clear line in the sand. On one side, you've got the standard medical model, the DSM-5, which labels things like anxiety as mental disorders. But on the other side, the Bodie method proposes its own model, the DBM-5. And in this model, those exact same symptoms are seen as a totally logical, biological reality of a body that's just completely overwhelmed by its environment.
So, what does this 40-day flush actually involve? Well, it's broken down into 4 main steps. First up, autophagy and fasting. The goal here is to trigger your body's own self-cleaning mechanism. It's like cellular spring cleaning. Step 2 is about alkalizing, using something as simple as baking soda to shift your body's internal terrain away from that acidic state we talked about with the Warburg Effect. Then step 3 is a trauma detox, which is all about releasing stored-up emotions like anger and grief. And finally, step 4 is all about setting environmental boundaries. This means physically removing yourself from sick buildings and, just as importantly, from toxic relationships.
But here's the thing. This whole protocol, it's not just about getting yourself well. The Manifesto's vision is way bigger than that. The final section is all about taking that personal recovery and using it as fuel for systemic advocacy and change.
And to show just how high the stakes are, the Manifesto throws out this number, $100. It claims that's the monthly food budget that many people with these invisible environmental illnesses are forced to live on. Why? Because their illness isn't recognized. It doesn't show up on a test, so they can't get disability support, and they're often too sick to work. It paints a really grim picture.
And that struggle is exactly why there's a clear political endgame here. The Manifesto actually sets a deadline, March 17, 2027. The goal is to get environmental injury legally recognized by that date. The whole idea is to show that when you fix a person's environment, their symptoms go away, proving it's a real, diagnosable, and therefore supportable condition.
And this one quote from the Manifesto really just sums it all up, doesn't it? Heal the liver, heal the lineage, change the law. It perfectly connects the dots from the personal, physical healing to the generational, and all the way out to the societal and the legal.
So this really leaves us with a huge thought-provoking question. What if we started to see these symptoms differently? Not as personal failings that we need to fix or manage, but as signals, as messages from our bodies telling us something is wrong with our environment. I mean, just think about it. How would that change everything? Our whole approach to medicine, to public policy, even to how we build our cities. It's a really powerful idea to chew on.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. It is so great to have you here with us today. I want you to start by just imagining a scenario for me.
Okay, let's hear it.
So imagine that you are constantly feeling anxious, like you are completely overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
You're physically exhausted right down to the marrow in your bones. You know?
Totally drained.
Exactly. And society, your doctors, your friends, your family, they all look at you and they tell you that it is a mental health issue.
Yeah, they say it's stress.
Right. They say it's all in your head.
That is an incredibly isolating, deeply frustrating place to be for any patient.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when the people you trust to heal you are essentially telling you that your suffering is a product of your own imagination, or at least your own inability to cope with normal life, it's devastating.
And usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this comforting expectation of precision, right?
Right.
Like engineering.
Right, like a clear-cut answer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like if you break your arm, you go to the hospital, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the screen, and the doctor just points at it and says, there it is, broken.
Mm-hmm. It is binary. It is clean.
But when you step into the world of chronic invisible illness, suddenly that x-ray machine is completely useless.
Yeah, you're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky.
But what if the root cause of that exhaustion and anxiety isn't in your head at all?
Okay.
What if the root cause is actually in your environment? What if it's in your history?
Wow.
Like, what if it's literally built into the walls of the room you are sitting in right now?
Framing the question that way completely flips the script on how we view health, wellness, and the very nature of our own minds.
It really does.
It moves the blame away from the individual's psyche and places it squarely on the physical world they inhabit.
And that brings us to our source material for today.
Yes, the Manifesto.
Right. We have a fascinating stack of notes and research centered around an incredibly unique, very provocative document called the Bodie Manifesto. Healing Livers, Lineages, and Laws.
Such a powerful title.
Yeah, and the author is D. Ann Barry. She also goes by the professional pseudonyms Mama Lovey Peace or Mama Lovey D.
Right.
And I just have to say, her background is unlike anything we usually encounter. It is a completely multifaceted synthesis of disciplines.
It really is. It's a very eclectic mix.
Yeah, she describes herself as a root cause Buddhist biohacker. And she notes she has been doing this since the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
She's also a primal personal trainer, a PTSD peer supporter for addiction, and a peace soul peace doula.
That combination of titles alone tells you we are stepping far outside the traditional kind of compartmentalized Western medical model.
Definitely.
When you hear terms like Buddhist biohacker or peace doula, it can initially sound a bit, esoteric, maybe even contradictory.
Right. Like, how do those fit together?
Exactly. But in practice, she is pulling from hard biological systems thinking, from deep trauma recovery, from physical training, and from ancient spiritual practices to create this unified theory of human health.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the mission of this deep dive is to really understand her framework, not just list her titles.
Right. We want to dig into the actual mechanics of it.
Yeah. Barry has designed this manifesto specifically to, and this is her phrasing, which I love, mother the unmothered.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It is. She is trying to give what she calls high-sensing souls the exact, precise tools they need to heal their bloated bellies and their broken body barriers.
And just to clarify, our goal today is to impartially explore this alternative paradigm. We're just looking at the text.
Right, absolutely. We're not taking sides, just reporting on her ideas.
Exactly. We are going to examine how Barry connects dots that most standard medical practitioners never think to connect.
Like what?
Well, we are talking about linking the modern dietary landscape, physical infrastructure, deeply stored emotional trauma, and ultimately, federal legislation.
It is a sweeping, ambitious theory, like how our modern world interacts with our ancient biology.
It's massive in scope.
And we really need to set the clock here, because there is a built-in ticking urgency to this manifesto.
Yes, the timeline is crucial.
That's right. Today is March 29, 2026. And according to Barry's text, we are now less than a year away from her stated target date.
Mm-hmm.
She has circled March 17th, 2027 on the calendar. That is her one-year countdown to achieving actual legislative recognition of environmental injury.
See, this isn't a passive philosophical document meant to just sit on a shelf.
No, not at all.
It is a working blueprint with a hard deadline. She's actively trying to force systemic change within a specific time frame.
So to understand where she's going and how she plans to change federal law in a year, we have to start where she starts, which is the why.
Right. Why is this happening?
Yeah, why is everyone so sick? Why is there this massive undeniable spike in early onset cancer and what she calls systemic collapse across the population?
And the manifesto claims this is absolutely no accident.
Right. It isn't just bad luck or bad genetics.
Exactly. It points directly to a massive foundational shift that happened in the 1980s.
Okay, let's get into that.
So the text highlights a very specific era of corporate consolidation that most people totally overlook when discussing public health.
Okay, I'm listening.
According to Barry, in the 1980s, big tobacco companies began heavily investing in and purchasing major sugar and food processing companies.
Which, just on its face, sounds like a wild corporate marriage.
Right.
Like the people who make cigarettes buying the people who make cookies. It's crazy.
It sounds bizarre, but the manifesto argues that this was far more than just a financial diversification strategy. It was an active exchange of technology and methodology.
Wait, really? Technology exchange between tobacco and food?
Yes. The text states that these newly formed conglomerates applied what Barry calls addictive nicotine engineering directly to the food supply.
Let me stop you there. Because when I hear nicotine engineering, my brain immediately pictures like scientists literally sprinkling nicotine dust into breakfast cereal.
Right.
That's not what she needs, is it? How does nicotine engineering actually apply to food?
She is referring to the application of the scientific principles of addiction.
Okay.
Tobacco companies had spent decades mastering the exact chemical combinations required to hijack the brain's dopamine pathways, and bypass natural satiety signals.
So they knew exactly how to make you crave more.
Exactly. So when they acquired food companies, they applied that exact same neurological mapping to everyday products.
Wow.
They manipulated the ratios of sugar, salt, and fat to hit what food scientists literally call the bliss point.
The bliss point. That sounds so innocent, but it's actually kind of sinister.
It really is. They engineered foods that chemically instruct your brain to keep eating long after your stomach is full. It mimics the compulsive consumption loop of a cigarette.
Wow.
And the text calls these hyperpalatable products.
So they essentially turned the grocery store aisles into a delivery system for behavioral addiction.
Pretty much, yeah.
And Barry argues that this specific corporate engineering led to generations of people inheriting what she calls a toxic bucket.
The toxic bucket is the foundational metaphor for her root cause puzzle.
Okay, break that down for me.
She frames the timeline not as a single event like getting food poisoning from a bad restaurant, but as a cumulative intergenerational overloading of the body's natural defensive systems.
So it builds up over time.
Exactly. This toxic bucket is filled day after day, year after year, with these hyperpalatable, chemically engineered substances. And for many people in this current generation, that bucket began overflowing during childhood.
And when that bucket overflows, that is when the physical damage really begins, right?
It's the turning point, yes.
The text specifically mentions people suffering from 40-plus leaky body barriers.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of this. We are talking about the body's literal defense grid, right?
Yes. The body is designed with a multitude of highly selective barriers. Think of the mucosal lining of the gut, or the blood-brain barrier, the endothelial lining of the blood vessels, even the skin itself.
Right.
These barriers are essentially intelligent biological bouncers. Their entire job is to keep essential nutrients inside the system and keep pathogens, toxins, and undigested proteins out.
But when the toxic bucket overflows.
Exactly. When the systemic inflammation from this engineered food reaches a critical mass, the tight junctions that hold these barriers together begin to degrade.
Oh, wow. They literally pull apart.
They do. They become leaky,
Yeah.
and suddenly the body's defense grid is compromised on over 40 different microscopic fronts.
You know, I was trying to conceptualize this earlier, and it feels a bit like having a smartphone where the storage is completely full.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Right. But instead of the operating system just giving you a polite little warning that says storage full, the manufacturer actually secretly installed a piece of malware.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, malware that forces the phone to keep downloading massive corrupted files in the background.
Constantly running.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eventually, your phone starts crashing, the battery drains in 20 minutes, your apps won't even open.
Right.
And standard medicine is basically just handing you an external battery pack and saying, well, try to charge it more often.
Wow.
Instead of, looking at the malware that is forcing the corrupted downloads in the first place.
That is a highly effective way to visualize the manifesto's critique of symptom management versus root cause resolution.
Thanks.
Because the malware in your analogy is that corporate chemical legacy from the 1980s.
Right.
It fundamentally altered the metabolic operating system of an entire generation. Standard medicine is treating the symptoms of the crash, the anxiety, the fatigue, the joint pain.
While ignoring the root issue.
Exactly. Ignoring the fact that the barriers meant to protect the system are actively leaking.
But I have a major question here.
Okay, shoot.
Let's say I accept the premise of the 1980s food engineering. Let's say I go home, I purge my pantry, I stop eating processed sugar, I throw away everything in a plastic wrapper. Is that it?
Well,
because if the whole problem is just the food filling up this bucket, it seems like we just need a really strict diet. I mean, hard to execute, sure, but intellectually very straightforward.
that is the exact pivot where Barry's framework expands dramatically.
Okay.
Because the food supply is only half the battle. If we want to understand the true overflowing reality of this toxic bucket, we cannot just look at what we are putting into our mouths.
Then what else are we looking at?
We have to look at the very spaces we inhabit. We have to look at our infrastructure.
You mean the environment around us?
Yes. The Manifesto is absolutely adamant that we are living in a fundamentally poisonous environment. It uses the term sick buildings.
Sick buildings.
Oh, yeah.
The text paints this incredibly vivid, almost claustrophobic picture of our internal biology being under constant, relentless siege from our external environment.
It really does.
It mentions things like microplastics, referencing a specific plastic detox documentary, And it heavily calls out hidden mold in places you would normally associate with health and safety.
Like where?
Like modern gyms and residential homes.
Ah. Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this concept of the sick building completely reframes the modern cultural narrative of a healthy lifestyle.
Explain that to me. Like, how does a building change the definition of a healthy lifestyle?
Think about the standard advice for someone trying to improve their health. You are told to go to a modern gym, right?
Yeah, of course.
You get on a treadmill, you spend an hour breathing heavily, forcing oxygen deep into your lungs, sweating, increasing your cardiovascular output.
Putting it out, right.
But Barry's text suggests that if that modern gym is a sick building, perhaps it has hidden black mold growing behind the drywall from a leaky pipe, or the HVAC system is circulating microscopic volatile organic compounds from the synthetic rubber flooring.
Oh, yuck.
Yeah. If that's happening, your attempt at getting healthy is biologically backfiring.
Wow. Because you're breathing it all in.
Exactly. Because you are inhaling a massive toxic load while your body is in a state of maximum exertion and permeability. You might actually be contributing to the very leaky barriers you are desperately trying to heal.
That is, frankly, terrifying.
It's a lot to process.
You are putting in the effort. You are doing everything society tells you to do to be healthy. And the physical box you are standing inside of is actively dismantling your immune system.
Yep.
And because of those 40-plus leaky barriers we just talked about, these environmental toxins, the mold spores, the microplastics from the air, they don't just pass harmlessly through the digestive tract.
Or get neatly filtered out by the lungs. No.
Right. The bouncers have left the doors open.
They enter the bloodstream directly. And the manifesto details exactly where they end up.
Okay, where do they go?
These specific types of fat-soluble toxins lodge themselves deeply into our tissues, specifically into our fascia.
Fascia. Let's make sure we define that clearly for the listener. Fascia is the connective tissue, right?
Yeah.
It's that, like, web-like casing that wraps around all our muscles, our organs, our nerves, holding everything in place.
It is a continuous, uninterrupted, three-dimensional web of tissue that extends from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. But the text adds a profoundly radical layer to this biological reality. It states that these fat-soluble toxins from the sick buildings lodge in the fascia right alongside our stored emotional traumas.
Whoa. Okay, wait. That is a massive conceptual leap.
It is a big leap.
Because usually we think of toxins as strictly physical, right? A mold spore, a piece of microplastic, a chemical from a cleaning spray.
Right, physical things.
And we think of trauma as strictly psychological or neurological, a bad memory, an emotional wound, a severe stress response.
Exactly.
But this manifesto is completely fusing them together. It is claiming they share the exact same physical real estate in our bodies.
It completely obliterates the traditional Western separation between the mind and the body. In Barry's framework, an emotional betrayal and a microplastic particle are not two different categories of a problem. They are two elements contributing to the exact same physical toxic load within the body's connective web.
But how does an emotional memory actually become a physical thing stored in tissue? That sounds like poetry, not biology.
The mechanism she relies on ties into how the nervous system reacts to threat.
Okay.
When a human experiences severe trauma or a massive emotional shock, the autonomic nervous system often triggers a freeze response.
Right. Fight, flight, or freeze.
Exactly.
Right.
The muscles contract, the breath shallows, and the fascial web literally tightens to armor the body.
It's bracing for impact.
Yes, and if that trauma is never processed, that tissue remains locked in a state of chronic constriction. Blood flow to that specific area becomes restricted.
Oh, I see.
Because the tissue is stagnant and poorly oxygenated, it becomes a biological sponge. So when those fat-soluble toxins from the leaky barriers enter the bloodstream, they naturally accumulate in these cold, restricted, traumatized areas of the fascia.
So the emotional lock creates the physical trap.
Exactly.
That makes the phrase she uses at the end of the text, peace on a poisonous planet, makes so much visceral sense.
It really hits home.
It's not just a poetic, catchy sign-off for a blog post. She is describing the literal physical reality of trying to maintain emotional and biological equilibrium when both your childhood history and your living room drywall are actively loading your fascia with stress.
The planet is poisonous physically, which exacerbates the trauma stored emotionally. And the emotional trauma restricts the tissue, which traps the physical poison.
Wow.
It is a perfect, devastating feedback loop.
Okay, so if our bodies are under this insane, compounding, dual assault physical toxins and stored trauma teaming up to break down our barriers and clog our fascia, what is actually happening at the cellular level?
Right, let's zoom in.
Yeah, how do our cells adapt to living in a poison swamp? Because the Manifesto argues that to understand how to fight back, we actually have to travel back in time.
Yes, we do.
Past the 1980s corporate food shift, all the way back to a laboratory in the 1940s.
The text anchors its entire biological intervention strategy in a specific historical moment. It points directly to the work of Dr. Otto Warburg, specifically highlighting his 1931 Nobel Prize-winning science.
A Nobel Prize from 1931. That is almost a century ago.
It is.
What exactly was Dr. Warburg doing in the 1930s that is so central to a biohacker's manifesto in 2026?
The Manifesto focuses heavily on what is scientifically known as the Warburg Effect.
Warburg Effect.
Dr. Warburg was studying cellular respiration, and he proved that cancer and systemic disease do not just randomly appear out of nowhere.
Right.
They require very specific, measurable environmental conditions to thrive. According to the text, Warburg showed that disease thrives in a cellular environment that is highly acidic and extremely low in oxygen.
Acidic and low in oxygen.
Yes. And crucially, when cells are in this suffocating environment, they stop breathing oxygen and switch to a backup engine. They fuel themselves specifically through sugar fermentation.
Sugar fermentation. So we are tying right back to the 1980s big sugar acquisition. That toxic bucket filled with hyper-palatable engineered sugar isn't just making us gain weight or giving us cavities. We are literally, spoon by spoon, feeding the exact cellular engine that disease needs to multiply.
What's fascinating here is how the Manifesto uses this decades-old science to fundamentally shift the focus of modern healthcare.
How so?
Well, traditional medicine is overwhelmingly focused on fighting the disease directly, right? Developing a chemical to attack the tumor or a targeted antibiotic to kill the bacteria.
Right, going to war with it.
But Barry's framework, utilizing Warburg's discoveries, argues that this is a losing battle. She suggests we should be looking entirely at the internal terrain.
So instead of going to war with the disease, you just make the neighborhood unlivable for it.
Yes. You change the underlying environment so the disease simply cannot biologically exist.
Oh.
You alter the cellular terrain from acidic and suffocating to alkaline and oxygen-rich.
So it's like realizing you have a weed problem in your garden. But instead of pulling them out one by one, you just change the pH of the soil so that only the good plants can grow and the weeds starve.
That is a perfect analogy.
But how does Barry propose we actually execute this massive biological shift? Because, if you tell me my internal terrain is highly acidic, my instinct is that I need a team of specialists and some incredibly advanced proprietary intravenous therapy.
Sure.
What is the tool she uses to change the pH of the human body?
It is remarkably, almost absurdly simple. The Manifesto calls it the alkaline buffer.
Okay, what is it?
And the primary chemical compound used to achieve this is baking soda, sodium bicarbonate.
Wait, baking soda? You are talking about the yellow box sitting in the back of my refrigerator right now absorbing old onion smells?
The very same compound.
Wow.
Barry describes using precisely dosed baking soda in water as a rapid biological interruption.
Just drinking baking soda water.
Yes. The theory is that when you introduce this highly alkaline substance into an acidic body, it actively shifts the pH of the internal terrain.
Okay.
As the environment becomes more alkaline, the blood's capacity to carry and deliver oxygen increases.
That makes sense.
By doing this, you are essentially suffocating the fungi, the rogue cells, and the trapped toxins by depriving them of the acidic, low-oxygen swamp they absolutely require to survive.
I have to admit, my skeptical alarms are ringing very loudly right now.
I don't blame you.
We are talking about an entire global medical infrastructure that spends hundreds of billions of dollars a year on highly engineered pharmaceutical treatments for chronic illness and cancer.
Yep.
And this manifesto, written by someone who identifies as a biohacker and a peace doula, is claiming that the fundamental key to disrupting systemic collapse is a $2 box of baking soda you can buy at any corner store.
Yes.
How does she justify bypassing the entire medical establishment with something so primitive?
She frames it not as primitive, but as foundational. This aligns perfectly with her stated mission to mother the unmothered. She is deliberately providing tools that do not require elite medical access, incredible wealth, or platinum-tier health insurance.
Oh, I see. It's accessible.
It is a radical democratization of cellular health. She is leveraging a Nobel Prize-winning metabolic mechanism from the 1930s to bypass the pharmaceutical gatekeepers of the 2020s.
Wow.
She views the simplicity of the intervention as its greatest strength.
Okay, let's assume for a moment that this internal terrain theory is completely sound.
Sure, for the sake of argument.
Let's assume the toxic bucket is overflowing, the fascia is locked with trauma and mold, and the cellular environment is screaming for an alkaline buffer.
Right.
How does the modern medical system treat these exact same symptoms today? Because if a patient walks into a standard psychiatric clinic tomorrow morning feeling deeply anxious, overwhelmed, having panic attacks, and dealing with chronic fatigue, the doctor sitting across from them isn't talking about the Warburg Effect or testing the pH of their fascia. They are looking at a completely different set of rules.
Very different.
And the Manifesto argues that standard medicine is looking at the completely wrong manual.
This is where the text mounts its most aggressive structural challenge to the current medical status quo.
Okay, how so?
The traditional psychiatric system relies on a very specific, universally accepted book to diagnose mental disorders. It is called the DSM-5.
Right, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It is the absolute Bible of psychiatry.
Yes, it is.
If it's not in the DSM, insurance won't cover it, and officially you don't have it.
Barry argues that this entire manual is based on a catastrophic biological misunderstanding.
It's a bold claim.
She asserts that the DSM-5 fundamentally mislabels environmental injuries as psychological issues. She posits that when a psychiatrist uses the DSM-5, they're looking at the smoke from a poisoned, overflowing toxic bucket and diagnosing the patient with a broken brain.
Wow. They are categorizing the symptoms instead of finding the fire.
Exactly.
So what she offers the alternative. I mean, she can't just burn the DSM-5 without offering a replacement.
She proposes her own, completely original framework. She calls it the DBM-5.
The DBM-5. What exactly does that acronym stand for?
It stands for de-stress, de-bloat, declutter for deep sleep, and CPTSD.
De-stress, de-bloat, declutter for deep sleep, and CPTSD. That is a completely different language than traditional psychiatry.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Gary is attempting to dismantle the entire philosophical infrastructure of modern mental health treatment.
It sounds like it.
Under the DBM-5 paradigm, severe symptoms like suicidal ideation, acute anxiety, and chronic depression are completely reframed.
How so?
They are no longer viewed as inherent mental illnesses, character flaws, or simple chemical imbalances locked inside the brain.
What are they then, if they aren't mental illnesses?
They are reframed as the desperate, logical cries of what she terms a high-sensing soul.
High-sensing soul.
Yes. These are individuals whose nervous systems are biologically drowning in an environment their bodies can no longer process. Their barriers broke first.
So their body is just overwhelmed.
The mental symptoms are just the body's loudest alarm bell indicating that the physical terrain is collapsing.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I want you, the listener, to just place yourself in that scenario.
Just imagine it.
Imagine you have spent years carrying the heavy, stigmatized, exhausting weight of a severe depression diagnosis. And instead of a doctor telling you that your brain is permanently malfunctioning and needs to be managed with synthetic serotonin for the rest of your life, someone looks at you and says, your brain is actually reacting perfectly normally to a fundamentally abnormal, toxic environment.
That's incredibly validating.
This is not a flaw in your character.
Yeah.
This is your bloated belly, your leaky gut barriers, and the mold in your sick building sounding the alarm to save your life.
It completely removes the burden of shame. It shifts the responsibility from the individual's perceived psychological weakness to the tangible, physical, measurable world around them.
It's an incredibly empowering message.
The Manifesto claims that when the physical environment is cleaned, when the fascia is cleared, and the biological root cause is addressed, the mental symptoms don't just get managed, they simply vanish.
Because the alarm bells have no biological reason to ring anymore.
Exactly.
But it raises a massive, daunting practical question.
I'm sure it does.
It is very easy to write a new diagnostic manual on paper. It's one thing to say, change your environment and heal your gut.
Yeah.
It is an entirely different thing to actually do it.
Yes, the execution is the hard part.
Right. How exactly does the DBM-5 propose we actually execute this de-stress, de-bloat, declutter process? You can't just talk therapy your way out of 40-plus leaky barriers.
The Manifesto is keenly aware of that gap, and it doesn't leave the reader with just a theory. It transitions directly from philosophy to a highly specific, rigid, time-bound protocol. We move from the why to the how with what she calls the Bodhi peace tree method.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of this protocol. I want to know exactly what someone is supposed to do.
Yeah.
What is the Bodhi peace tree method?
The central engine of this method is a grueling 40-day flush protocol.
A 40-day flush. Why 40 days specifically? That number obviously has a ton of historical and religious weight, right? Like
Right.
Noah's Ark, Moses, Jesus in the desert.
Right.
Is it just a symbolic number to make the protocol feel more profound?
Well, while it certainly carries that cultural weight, the text grounds the 40-day timeline in human biology.
Oh, really?
According to Barry, 40 days is the biological sweet spot for deep cellular turnover.
Interesting.
It is the precise duration of time required for the body to execute a systemic metabolic factory reset. It takes roughly that long for a significant portion of your red blood cells, skin cells, and mucosal linings to die off and regenerate. It is a full biological cycle.
All right, so what is actually happening to the patient during these 40 days? Walk me through the mechanics.
It involves several intense, overlapping, and compounding biological interventions. The first major pillar is autophagy and fasting.
Okay, fasting.
The text describes this as utilizing biological stillness to trigger the body's natural recycling program.
Biological stillness. I actually love that phrase.
That's very poetic.
You are essentially just stopping the constant influx of food, stopping the constant downloading of the malware, to go back to our phone analogy, and you are giving the digestive system a moment of profound quiet to clean up the hard drive.
Exactly, because the digestive system uses a massive amount of the body's daily energy. When the body isn't constantly expending energy on digesting hyperpalatable foods, a survival mechanism kicks in.
Right.
The body turns inward for fuel and begins actively consuming its own dead, damaged, or senescent cells. It recycles its own metabolic waste.
And that is the literal definition of autophagy.
Yes. The second vital component of the 40 days, which we touched on earlier, is alkalizing.
Right, the daily dosing of the baking soda, the alkaline buffer.
During the entire 40-day fasting period, this buffering protocol is used to actively lower systemic inflammation and artificially calm the body's fight-or-flight response.
Okay.
By continuously shifting the pH toward alkaline, you are chemically signaling to the nervous system that it is safe, that it doesn't need to be in a constant state of panic and tissue lock.
Okay, so we have fasting to trigger autophagy, and we have alkalizing to change the cellular terrain. That covers the physical chemical side of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
But earlier, we spent a lot of time talking about how trauma and toxins are locked together in the fascia. Fasting doesn't automatically cure trauma. Does the 40-day flush address the emotional side of that tissue lock?
It absolutely does, and this is perhaps the most radical boundary-pushing aspect of the entire manifesto.
Okay, what is it?
The third component is what Barry calls the trauma detox, and it explicitly involves the act of crying while fasting.
Crying while fasting as a required part of the protocol.
Because the manifesto operates on the strict understanding that physical toxins and emotional traumas share the exact same physical space in the connective tissue, it dictates that you cannot heal the physical body without actively expelling the emotional payload.
Wow.
The text states that to truly heal the biological liver, you must process the toxic souls, the deep betrayals, and the unmothered wounds of your past.
The manifesto actually uses the term toxic souls to describe people who have harmed you. That is intense.
It is entirely uncompromising, and it makes a profoundly striking biological claim.
What's the claim?
The manifesto frames anger, rage, and crying not just as healthy emotional releases, but as strict metabolic requirements for clearing the lineage and healing the body.
Okay, let's unpack this. A metabolic requirement.
Yes.
Meaning, she is arguing that just like your body requires oxygen to breathe or water to hydrate your cells, your physical liver requires the physical act of crying and the vocal expression of anger to detoxify itself from the trapped fascial trauma.
That is the exact synthesis she is making.
It is treating your tears as a biological exhaust pipe. You aren't just sad. Your body is literally, chemically venting out the stored betrayals from your fascia.
Biology and psychology are completely unified in this moment. The physical tears are the necessary vehicle for the expulsion of both the emotional memory and the physical toxicity.
Wow.
If you fast without crying, you are only doing half the work.
I have to be honest, this sounds incredibly, almost impossibly difficult.
It's grueling.
Think about the sheer discipline and energy required for this protocol. You are physically exhausted from fasting. You are drinking alkaline buffers. You are actively, intentionally digging up memories of toxic souls from your past and forcing yourself to process deep, unresolved betrayals, all while recognizing that breaking down and sobbing is a required part of the physical work.
It's a lot.
This isn't a wellness retreat. This is a total life overhaul. It's exhausting just to think about.
It is not designed to be a passive or gentle treatment. It is an active, demanding, aggressively confrontational protocol. And to your point about how difficult it is, it has one final, absolutely non-negotiable step.
Which is?
Environmental boundaries.
Right, the environment. We can't forget the sick buildings.
The manifesto declares as a core tenet that clean air is medicine.
Clean air is medicine. I like that.
Therefore, moving away from sick buildings and physically separating yourself from toxic relationships isn't just a friendly suggestion for a happier life.
Right. It's not just a self-care tip.
It is a rigid, non-negotiable biological requirement for recovery. If you do the intense 40-day flush, you fast, you cry, you alkalize, but you stay living in the mold-filled apartment, or you stay in close proximity to the toxic souls who traumatized you, the barriers will just immediately break down again.
The bucket will just refill.
Exactly.
It's like spending a fortune to surgically remove a bullet, but you refuse to step out of the line of fire. You have to change your coordinates.
That's a great way to put it.
But I have to push back here on the reality of this. Who actually have the resources to do this?
That's the big issue.
Who has the money to just abandon their lease, move out of a sick building, stop eating for 40 days, and confront everyone who has ever wronged them? It requires an immense amount of privilege to execute this level of boundary setting.
And that very real, very painful logistical limitation is exactly what drives the final section of Barry's text.
Okay, where does it go?
This Bodhi peace tree method, the 40-day flush, it offers a very clear, albeit grueling path for individual healing. But as we established at the very beginning of the deep dive, Barry's manifesto doesn't stop at the individual.
Right.
She knows most people can't afford to just walk away. She's not just trying to cure one high-sensing soul at a time. She argues that the systemic rules governing our entire society are fundamentally broken and need to be rewritten.
So the text transitions from individual physiology to federal policy. The manifesto is deeply rooted in advocacy. It is about changing the laws.
The ultimate goal is structural change.
And why do the laws need to change? What is fundamentally broken about the current legal and medical system from her perspective?
Barry points out that current federal disability laws completely fail individuals who are suffering from these invisible environmental illnesses.
Oh, because the system is designed for the broken arm, the visible tumor.
Exactly.
Because these leaky barriers and fascial traumas can't be seen on a standard lab test. We are right back to the broken X-ray machine from the beginning of the show.
This raises an important question. How does a massive bureaucratic legal system built entirely on visible, measurable, standardized proof accommodate an illness that lives invisibly in the connective tissue and the microscopic tight junctions of the gut?
And what's the answer?
The brutal answer currently is that it doesn't.
Wow. And the human cost of that systemic failure is staggering.
It really is.
The manifesto notes a specific grim reality from the fall of 2024. Many of these individuals, these high-sensing souls who have collapsed under the weight of environmental injuries, are forced to survive on a meager $100 a month food budget.
It is a devastating trap. The standard medical system lacks the diagnostic tools to see these injuries on a routine blood panel.
Right.
Because the doctors cannot officially diagnose what they cannot measure on a standard lab, the legal system will not grant disability benefits.
And because the patients cannot get financial benefits, they are left to starve, both financially and medically.
Yes. They are trapped inside the very sick buildings that caused the illness in the first place because they literally cannot afford to move to clean air.
It's a complete systemic catch-22.
Holy.
And that explains the urgency. It explains the countdown clock and the target date we talked about at the top of the deep dive, March 17th, 2027.
A deadline.
Barry's ultimate mission is to prove, on a mass scale, that fixing the environment cures the so-called mental symptoms. She wants to gather enough undeniable proof from people executing the DBM-5 to force the legislative recognition of environmental injury by that exact date.
She is attempting to build an undeniable bridge of evidence. She wants to connect the healing of the individual liver to the clearing of the ancestral lineage all the way up to halls of lawmakers, heal the liver, heal the lineage, change the law.
It really recontextualizes the YouTube video titles that she includes in the manifesto.
Oh, definitely.
When you first read them, they sound like catchy clickbait designed for an algorithm. Things like, why it's all in your head is a corporate lie, or drowning in plain sight, the high-sensing soul's guide to the DBM-5.
Right, they sound like typical internet titles.
But when you understand the context of the $100 a month food budget and the sick buildings, these aren't just titles. These are literal battle cries.
They absolutely are.
They are rallying flags thrown up for a population of high-sensing souls who feel completely abandoned, invisible, and discarded by both the legal and medical systems.
They are desperately needed educational tools designed to validate the lived physical experience of people who have been gaslit for decades, told over and over that their physical suffering is just a psychological illusion.
So what does this all mean? We have covered a truly massive amount of ground today on this deep dive.
We really have.
We started with the corporate origins of the toxic bucket, tracing how the 1980s marriage of big tobacco and big sugar engineering fundamentally altered our relationship with food and hijacked our satiety signals.
We explored the invisible, suffocating environmental reality of sick buildings, microplastics, and hidden mold, and unpacked the radical idea of how those fat-soluble toxins lodge deeply in our fascia, precisely where our unhealed emotional traumas are locked.
We traveled back in time to the 1940s to look at Dr. Otto Warburg's Nobel Prize-winning science, understanding how disease and cancer thrive in an acidic, low-oxygen terrain.
Right.
And how something as astonishingly simple as baking soda can act as an alkaline biological interruption.
We examine the profound paradigm shift of replacing the psychiatric DSM-5 with the biohacker's DBM-5, moving from blaming the patient's mind to healing their physical environment through the de-stress, de-bloat, declutter framework.
And we walked step by step through the grueling Bodhi berry peace tree method, the intense 40-day flush protocol, utilizing fasting for autophagy, daily alkalizing, strict environmental boundaries, and the incredibly provocative concept of crying and processing toxic souls as a literal metabolic requirement to detoxify the liver.
All of this leading to the ultimate ticking clock goal of changing federal disability laws by March 17th, 2027.
It is a remarkable, cohesive, and fiercely uncompromising vision.
And perhaps the best way to encapsulate everything we have discussed is to look at Barry's closing message to the reader, her final mantra.
Oh, isn't it?
It reads, de-stress, de-bloat, declutter for deep sleep, peace on a poisonous planet. It is a comprehensive, ambitious promise to heal the soul, the sleep, the stools, the stress, and the soil.
It really leaves you with a tremendous amount to process. And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We started this deep dive talking about that broken X-ray machine, navigating the murky diagnostic waters of feeling overwhelmed and being told it's just stress, it's just in your head.
Right, the feeling of isolation.
But if this manifesto is even partially right, if our deepest emotional traumas are literally physically bound to the environmental toxins locked in our connective tissue, then the next time you feel a sudden crushing wave of anxiety or a deep, unexplained sadness wash over you, you have to stop and ask yourself a completely different question. Are you actually having a mental health moment? Or is your body just reacting to the room you're sitting in?